welcome to another episode of Laying Down the Lore 40K, a lore podcast in which we aim to separate our Drukhari from our Dark Angels, our Tyranids from our Tau, and our Craft Worlds from our Chaos Marines, and generally ask, what's up with this Warhammer 40K stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I know pretty much fuck all about 40K. With me is my co-host Christopher Crowlin Allen.
G'day, mates. G'day.
Who knows absolutely fuck all about 40K.
Kind of true.
And my dear brother Darren.
I didn't touch it, I promise.
Who knows so much about 40K, it's a wonder he has time to do anything else. Over the years, this dichotomy between our levels of understanding became clear, and this series is an attempt to address that ignorance.
Hurrah! Ignorance!
Harumble.
Like when people open files on a computer they shouldn't open. Yeah. I'm not at all bitter.
Dar is recording this from his backup laptop because somebody did something they shouldn't do on a site which will remain nameless.
Nurgle got into his computer.
Yeah.
It's been nurgled.
Nurgle.com.
Nurgle.
Don't go there. Don't go
All I'm saying is it wasn't Pornhub like everybody else uses.
like the rest of us.
Listen, hey, no one should be ashamed of a Humpty Dumpty fetish. All right? I feel I was taken advantage of by the people that run these kinds of sites.
Humpty Dumpty Hub.
Yeah, make sure it's Humpty Dumpty Hub and not Dump Hub. That's something completely different.
Hump Dump Hub.
.de.
Why? Okay. Why am I envisaging that website being in German?
Because it's that kind of thing.
Because of South Park. Because of South Park and their bigotries.
Darren, are you just building your studio as we fucking record the podcast? Like,
no. What do you mean?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Graal, are you happy? Are you happier now that Dar has some acoustic treatment in his room?
Some proper acoustic treatment. Yeah, now it looks like an emo insane bin around him.
Yeah.
It looks with all the black foam.
My biggest concern is ending up in one of them alabaster chambers.
I think you mean an anaconda chamber.
You mean an arboreal chamber?
Isn't that a greenhouse?
Again, for listeners, just to bring you in on this joke, we were talking about acoustic treatment and an anechoic chamber, which is a dead space.
Pardon me?
Which is what? What's an anechoic chamber?
Isn't that a place in a zoo where there's snakes?
Close enough.
Close enough.
No, an anaconda chamber is one that baffles sound. Yeah.
And an anechoic chamber is where they keep snakes.
Yeah.
In their pyramids of torture.
Speaking of torture,
Crowl, what happened last episode?
Go on then, I'll take this one. Episode 13, it was the Space Marines. Marines in space.
You can ask me questions. You can ask me questions.
Fine, all right.
I'll take questions.
Why are you the way you are?
Summarize Space Marines.
Okay, next. Pass. Okay, I'll put that back on you. Why am I the way I am?
Because of me.
Exactly. Right, go on, Kral. Hit me.
All right, okay.
Question me.
In no more than 5 words, summarize the Space Marines.
Chunky, transhuman space soldier.
That's 4.
I'll say transhuman can be classed as one word. You got one more word left. Go on, you got change.
Badgers.
Badges. Perfect.
There is a chapter of Space Marines. They're a homebrew set that were on Facebook, but they are the Space Badgers.
Fucking yes.
In fact, amazing. I think I'm misremembering it. I think it's a fan-made one called... they're called the Star Badgers. Yeah.
The Spadgers.
Whoa!
You can't say that.
You can't say that outside of an alabaster chamber.
Yeah, you can say it because you're in an asylum right now, but yeah, I can't. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm drawing a blank, so yeah, you guys take it.
Oh, okay, right.
Space Marines, surprisingly.
Space Marines. What can we tell you about Mr.
And apparently your mind's drawing a blank as well, Benny.
I'm having a flashback to every time I've ever had to give a book report.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I mean, that was definitely...
Catcher in the Rye. Well, there's this farmer, and he's growing rye.
Mad hay fever.
Hay fever. So he caught hay fever in the rye field. Overall,
and they all lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
Darren, can you summarize for us what we covered last episode?
Give us a topic that we discussed within the episode, and we'll take it from there. Go.
How many companies are in a Space Marine chapter?
3.
10.
List them. And if you say first company, second company, third company, I'll punch you right in the head.
So there were. So the first company was. So there's 10 companies. There's 100 Marines in each company.
The veteran.
So veterans were the first company.
Yeah,
and then companies 2 to 10 were non-veterans.
That's not untrue.
I want to say this with a great deal of love.
Go on.
I hope your outie turns into an innie.
You mean my innie turns into an outie? I mean, Jesus. So there's the tactical Marines. Then I think there was like 6 chapters of tactical Marines. They were the most numerous, weren't they? And then you had and then there was 2 other groups, and I can't remember what they were called.
I know there was some Terminator armor. It's somewhere in that stew of Space Marine goodness. I remember that.
Do I have to turn this fucking podcast around and do that episode again?
By the sounds of it. So there, I mean, we literally did this record like a few days ago. How are we not doing this?
Okay, hang on. The first company is the veteran company. Yes. Companies 2 to 5 are the battle companies.
Battle companies. Yep.
And they were mainly full of tactical Marines.
Mainly full of tactical Marines.
Ish.
Kinda.
Crowl. Fuck's sake, man. Come on.
You didn't let me finish. Kinda. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's some ish tactical Marines. Are they mainly tactical Marines in the battle companies, though?
There are 6 squads of tactical Marines in a battle company. What are the other ones?
That's where I'm getting confused. Okay, so there's 2 others, isn't there? There's a group of 2. There's the tactical Marines. They're a group of 6, and then there's another group of 2. Devastators.
Devastators are the heavy weapon guys, and they're one of the groups of 2. So there's 20 Devastator Marines.
And are they
guys on bikes?
They specialize.
Guys on attack bikes.
No.
Do the Devastators specialize?
No, Ben.
The other 2, are they like the training?
The Vanguard.
The Vanguard are from the veteran company, but you're on the right track. The Vanguard are veteran assault Marines.
That's what Ben says. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what Qual. That's what Crowl into.
What, Jonathan Was?
I'll give it 3 wibbles.
Who's the other group of 20 in the?
I feel like
I literally said it. I literally said the word.
Was it? When did you say the word? And what did it sound like? What was the word?
It's 20 assault Marines.
Okay.
Assault Marines.
Are the assault Marines the kind of training guys that become tactical Marines?
No, those are the fucking scouts.
Those are the scouts, right? So where were they? Where were they were they a separate company?
That's a different IP, Ben. That's a different IP.
So where were they in the fated place?
They were next to me in an anechoic chamber. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
You got it right though that time. It wasn't an anechoic chamber.
I had it right every time.
I just want to highlight, all the years of mocking I got for my terrible recaps, certainly in the early episodes. That's what it feels like, Ben. That's what it feels like.
Mate, I'm taking no responsibility for this. I really should listen back to the episodes.
All right. The structure of a chapter. 10 companies of 100 battle brothers, not 100 space marines. We covered that. There are other space marines in.
So that's like a million. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. What? When they sit down to design the chapters, they've got the pinkies out like Dr. Evil. 1 million space. Do you mean 1,000? Silence! Space Marine chapter. First company is the veteran company. Companies 2 through 5 are battle companies, and these are mixed forces. So you have 60 tactical marines, 20 assault marines, and 20 devastator marines. So between them, they can take a planet over. One company can, in fact, take over a planet. Companies,
depending on what that planet is, right?
No.
Yeah, like if it's a gas giant.
Any planet.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how heavily guarded.
There is enough combat capacity in one company of Space Marines to take over a planet. Now, that's not like a war of attrition. We discussed that the Space Marines are surgical strike forces.
Right, okay.
So they would cut the head off any rebellion. They'd take out the leadership and thus then begin to mop up. There are, of course, planets that are already en masse, where their rebellion is en masse, where it's not advantageous to do that, or where there are forces so large that they could still be effective, but they would be entering into a war of attrition, and that's not really what Space Marines do.
What is a war of attrition?
War of attrition is like a meat grinder. So it's like the Battle of the Somme would be described as a war of attrition. It's just you're grinding together 2 armies, and the one with the most soldiers wins, bar all other things being equal. Companies 6 and 7 are the tactical reserve companies. These are companies full of tactical marines. And it's from there that battle companies replenish their ranks, really. You then have the 8th company, which is an assault company. Those are guys who, in general, carry a chainsaw and a bolt pistol and either run at you,
jump pack at you, or operate like vehicles like bikes, or
scream at you from a distance.
Yeah. No, that's the noise marines of the Emperor's Children, which we will cover shortly.
Amazing.
I tell you what, watching a noise marine operate in an anechoic chamber would be hilarious.
That's how you combat a noise marine, isn't it? You just deck out, you just cover the space marine in those foam panels. Like, sorted.
Send the foam warriors in.
Yeah, they just roll them onto the battlefield.
And the 9th company is the Devastator Company, and those are the spectacular heavy weapons crews that have man-portable las cannons, plasma cannons, what's referred to
heavy
as
flamers.
A multi... Well, no, I think they're very inclusive, Ben. And then they're able to... No.
I didn't get that either, Ben.
I'm trying. Nope. No, I didn't get it.
There's a joke in there somewhere. Hold on.
They have a weapon called a multi-melter, which is a microwave gun, which when they hit you with it, when they shoot you with it, when they hit you with it, you just go, stop hitting me with a gun. They shoot you with it
properly, you idiot.
You turn into a fucking ready meal.
Yeah. Really hot on the outside, still frozen on the inside.
Yeah. Fucking microwaves.
When you're shot with a melter weapon, all the water in your body evaporates explosively. It's like you get you get the literal atomic shits. You just
it's the way to go, isn't it?
Sploosh.
Yeah.
Just like they'll remember you. They'll remember you for a long time after that. He shat himself to death.
Does the multi-melter have multi-melter or
multi-melta?
Yeah. Does it have a range? What's the range of that?
Yeah, it's roughly the range of a bolt gun. So it's incredibly powerful, but it's quite short-ranged.
Right.
Where a las cannon, you can shoot across the battlefield.
Yeah, right.
And miss your target.
What are you, Kral? Are you more of a long-range las cannon kind of guy, or a get up in their grill with a multi-melter?
No,
I like to see
I
the
think
whites of
Kral's
their
definitely
eyes.
a heavy flamer.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know what that means, Krell. It could be a compliment. It could be, I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
What did you call me?
It's
one
more
of them.
an observation, really, than either of those other things.
But no, I definitely like to see the whites of my enemy's eyes. I like to see the life drain from them as I kill them.
Jesus
definitely.
Christ, Crowley.
Yeah.
That
Mate.
is intense, bruv.
Then you should join a chapter of a successor chapter to the Blood Angels called the Flesh Tearers, whose icon,
do?
their symbol is a circular saw.
Wow. I can't do that because I'm already part of the Spadgers.
The Spadgers.
The Spadgers.
Mate, we all know about your lack of integrity. If your PR representation characters anything
That was
to
a
go
different
by, mate,
podcast. You cannot carry that reputation over here. This is I'm starting this show with a clean slate.
Mate, the integrity follows you. Your reputation gets ahead.
Yeah,
of you. It's not my fault.
Weren't you all about the Eldar?
I am. But if I was also a Space Marine, it would be the Spadger. So.
God. He's such a chapter whore, isn't he? He's such a faction tart.
He's like this generation's Bill Oddie.
Right, so
that's the correct response because I didn't expect either two of you to know who the fuck Bill Oddie was.
Bill Oddie, no, I knew Bill Oddie. Sorry, I just got interrupted by a call. But Bill Oddie, he was the weirdo bird specialist, wasn't he?
That's our Benny.
Right, Space Marines, yada yada yada.
I've not finished. The 10th company is the Scout Company, and that's where the recruits come from.
Oh, that's
we talked last episode about the process to going from a 10-year-old homicidal maniac to a space marine.
A professional homicidal maniac, a paid homicidal maniac.
Yeah, they're not. Are they paid in any way?
No, Space Marines aren't paid because they view themselves as kind of space monks, like Templars, we would have them in our own world, our own history.
And I do remember
militant orders.
Militant orders sounds like a really stuck-up scout leader or something. Anyway, I do remember the tale of the young kids. They kind of have to run across the Saharan desert equivalent, basically pitted against one another.
That's specifically the Blood Angels.
That is exactly. That's the bit you remember. Jesus,
shut up. Then they get to fight in the pit of Sanguinius or something, or like
Angels Fall.
Like that. Angels Fall.
Which is why is it called Angels Fall, Crow?
Still shut up, Ben, because that's when Sanguinius fell to wherever that hole is in the planet.
Okay.
And
why
if they make it to there, they get to shut up. They get to fight.
Why did he fall there?
With other? Why? Why not? You got to fall somewhere. I mean,
I mean, if you're going to fall anywhere, you may as well fall in Angel's Fall. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
You don't want to fall in Angel's Bad Landing. That's a terrible place to fall.
The best place to
fall. You definitely don't want to fall in Angle's Fall. Ooh.
On that moon, the best place to fall is Angel's Delight.
Always strawberry.
It's a type of pudding for everyone not in the UK.
Yeah, it was like a powdered ready thing. You just added milk, and that was it. Whisked it, and it was just
it's the most common British crop.
What, Angel's Delight?
Yeah,
I imagine that's what corpse starch is like. You just add like, do you know what I mean?
It is. That's a fucking good. That's a good comparison. Like, I reckon the same sort of like level of kind of nutrition is found in people that live exclusively on Angel's Delight as to like corpse starch. You know what I mean? Yeah, which is to say, like malnourished, rickets. And a series of other things related.
I love the idea that the go-to disease is rickets.
You've seen all the Necromunda characters, right? All bandy legs. Yeah, that's what happened.
He's a loyal follower of the Emperor with gingivitis, the most common disease in the Imperium.
Right. So what happens in Angel's Fall?
Angel's Fall. So the kids that survive the Saharan marathon thing of death get to fight to death there, and if they come out victorious there, they get the opportunity to try and become a Space Marine, which involves lots of aftermarket operations and things like that.
How many organs did they install?
An extra lung, an extra heart, 2 livers, 3 kidneys,
2 livers, a pound of bacon,
4 bong hits, and 2 cheeseburgers.
2 cheeseburgers.
And of course, the Venom Spitty thingy, my favorite feature. Excuse me.
But how many organs in total? Before
definitely 801,002 and what was that, Darren? Keep going.
I was signaling 18, Chris. Plus the black carapace.
Is it 17 installed first?
In phases, in separate phases, yes, between the ages of 10 and 18.
You mean they don't just jam them in all at once?
Yeah.
Hand me my organ cannon. Boom.
Now grab your ankle, sir.
Like foie gras.
I like to go, bam, and then he nods sagely. You are now a scout.
Well, I feel a bit squidgy. What was the black carapace, Krau?
Oh yeah, of course, the black carapace. So they took your actual skin off and put on this artificial layer, which is basically basically a living computer, a neural network, which interfaces with your nervous system. I think they just kind of slap your skin back on that in a hodgepodge kind of way, a bit of what do they call it, Pritt stick. You know what I mean?
Space staples.
Bit of super glue. Yeah, exactly. So you've got like this wonky thing going on. And that allows you to basically use your armor, your Space Marine armor, as a second skin. It's as if you're not wearing anything.
Yes.
Crow.
And this is not a loaded question, but here we go. What is interesting about a Space Marine's helmet?
It has no visor. It doesn't have.
It has no visor. That's correct.
But it just has little cameras. Is it like multiple cameras so they can see in different views? Like
there's between, depending on the type of armor, there's between 4 and 6 separate cameras in each, in quotes, eye, and that allows them to see in various spectrums of wavelengths and what have you.
Various Instagram filters.
Yeah. yeah.
Ludwig.
Oh, it's great. I just imagine a Space Marine fighting a load of Tyranids, and all he can see is the Tyranids have got like bunny ears wherever they go.
Just like kind of flashing off and on as they kind of lock on to the thing. Like not quite.
Yeah.
Right. Which begs the question, until the scouts become a full-fledged battle brother, do you think they get pop-up ads on their visors?
Yeah. Have you considered the Imperium insurance policies?
And even though they've been to the same website for a lifetime, it still asks you for the bloody
cookies.
The cookies every fucking time. Like, Jesus Christ.
So I think, Dar, like, given the absolute shambles of the start of this recap, I see once Krell and I are given like a single point that was discussed, it seems to like access a memory bank, and then it all just pours out as Krell has just demonstrated. So maybe you need to give us like a bullet point and see if we can expand on it from there for future.
I mean,
episodes.
I'm worried that you're tapping into some sort of psychic ability, and I'm going to phone the Inquisition immediately after this record.
Who?
Right. Well. Oh, don't. We covered that, Krell. Quick! Give him a bullet point. So the
between the eyes.
Right. So more Space Marines today.
Please.
All right. One of the aspects that we discussed last time was what's involved in founding a Space Marine chapter.
Oh, yeah.
And how these chapters are almost never founded individually. So what we're going to do is have a look at some of the more well-known founding events, and then we'll take a look at a couple of organizations of Space Marines, military organizations, that would fall outside of the kind of standard Codex compliance. We talked about the Codex Astartes last episode. However, strangedly.
It's a word.
Mr. Ben.
The Codex that Robert Gurleyman issued, Bobby G issued to the guys on Terra, the High Lords. was, because obviously the books that you buy in our world are called codices, codexizes.
Yes.
Were they named after the one that Robert Gurleyman issued, or did Robert Gurleyman issue a codex after the release of codexes in the real world?
Chicken or egg?
Which was named first?
They sort of were named side by side-ish. It's the tail end of the first edition where the codex comes in. In fact, actually, the Codex Astartes was, if I'm remembering correctly, just the title of the first article about Space Marines, which is either the Ultramarine chapter or the actual army list, which came out a few issues later. So I think it had been, actually, yes, it had been, the Codex Astartes came first as a concept. It took a while. It took a while to be refined into the thing that it is now, but it was from the second edition onwards that an army's codex book was released.
And then Bobby G, they included the name in the lore at that point.
No, the name was already in the lore, but it was not as defined as it is now. It became more defined from the second edition onwards.
Right. And so what format was it when he issued it? Is it like a handbook? Was it a PDF?
Audible only.
Yeah.
Audible. It was behind a paywall.
Yeah.
You got the first chapter for free, if you use the phrase. No, it was issued to all of the Primarchs, who then either ignored
they were just
it
like,
or
"Oh,
issued
great,
it.
thanks. Yeah, I'll read it later." Yeah.
It's an operational manual, so it's very much just like standard operating procedures in a business. It's a functional, practical document.
How did the other Primarchs take that? They're like, "You're teaching us to suck eggs, mate. What gives you the authority to tell us how to operate and react?"
Some adopted it because they could see the purpose of it. If we recall, the purpose was to reduce the influence a single Space Marine commander could have, and but others rebelled against it to the point where they almost had to go to war.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's a bit extreme, isn't it?
Can you give us a little teaser as to who those individuals might have been?
No.
Okay, all right.
I tell you, Rogel Dorn could see the practicality of it, but was so focused on the defense of Terra that he didn't want to disband his legion, the Imperial Fist Legion. And then when it came time for the second founding, segue, that's when two of the most famous successor chapters for the Imperial Fists, those being the Crimson Fists, who were on the cover of the very first edition of Warhammer 40K, and the Black Templars, who are my favorite, who were in the lore and did have some rules towards the end of third edition, but it was really fourth edition when they got their own codex.
Oh, that's interesting. So they were originally, the Black Templars originated from Rogel Dorn's Terra-based, planet-based legion, but they're now fleet-based.
They are fleet-based, and they're one of those chapters that's kind of sneaky in their codex compliance. They operate on a crusade level rather than a company level. They are able to assemble companies in kind of name only, but the last estimate was there was nearly 5,000 Black Templars around the galaxy in various crusades, which is absolutely against the principles of the Codex Astartes, which, as we recall, limits it to 1,000 battle brothers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why? What's symbolic about 1,000? What if you've got enough units that you can have as many crusades as you bloody like? Is it just...
Well, that's exactly the issue that the Codex Astartes was designed to work against, the concentration of power in the hands of a single Space Marine commander.
So with the Black Templars, is there a single commander for those 5,000?
Yes, there's a chap called High Marshal Helbrecht, who is really subtle, even for the Black Templars, because he dresses completely in gold.
Can't you tell I'm a Black Templar?
So I'm thinking, he's talking with his tailor now. He's like, I'm thinking maximum bling. What do you think?
Yeah. What would be a good fabulous? Yes, I want a fabulous suit of armor. The Emperor Fabulous. But technically, the Black Templars are a renegade heretic chapter because they've broken one of the foundational precepts of the Codex Astartes. But as a Black Templar player, I would tell everyone to go get fucked.
They still believe they're loyal.
Well, they worship the Emperor as a god.
Okay, right.
So they're one of the few chapters of Space Marines that do that. Because if you recall, the others view him as as a secular emperor to be venerated for all his deeds.
Emperor.
A central emperor. That's why he's got that gold armor.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's what you don't want to see on anyone's business card. Sensualist. Anyway, let's move on. Second founding. So, second founding was, as the name suggests, after the first founding, and that was where the Space Marine legions were divided into the chapters. As we said, some willingly, some extremely unwillingly.
No!
There were
no! Just laying on the floor like a dead weight.
You can't make me go! During the second founding, there were roughly 200 new chapters named. So each Space Marine Legion, each of the 9 ones that were left, subdivided into slightly over 200 other chapters. The most populous of which, of course, is the Ultramarines, because as we discussed, they had billions, if not trillions, of battle brothers, and were able to do so. The second founding was really a kind of watershed moment, and it splintered the given power of the Astartes, which meant that ordinary humans, in quotes, had to take up the brunt of the command of the Imperium. The Space Marine chapters were a kind of fire at will kind of organization. A chapter would be given, as we discussed, either a fleet, so it would be a crusading style mobile strike force, or they were effectively given governorship of a planet and thus had to protect not only that planet, but the space or sector around their homeworld. This poddled on for a good few years, and the Imperium went through the Great Scouring and pushed back the forces of chaos that had overtaken the Imperium during the Horus Heresy. Towards I think it was like 1,000 odd years later, there was an orc warlord who devastated the Imperium, and it was really almost a case where that Terra was going to be overrun by greenskins. And so the Imperial Fists and a few other chapters went out to behead the beast, as he was referred to. It went so catastrophically wrong that for a time there was only a single Imperial Fist Space Marine left. All of the other Space Marines had been killed in battle with the Great Beast. This is covered in like the Horus Heresy novels. There's 712 of them. There is there's a 12-book run describing not only the destruction of the Imperial Fists and the rebuilding of the Imperium and the Space Marine chapters, but also the war within the Inquisition at that time, which we'll touch on later on.
What's that series called?
It's called The Beast Arises. I think that's the first book.
And is that written by the guys that write all
it's
of the
same
heresies?
guys, yeah, same guys.
Right,
It's
okay.
really well written. It really delves into the politics of the Imperium in a very exciting, getting shot kind of way, rather than just a kind of plain old read.
Right,
but
okay.
definitely worth everyone's time. I'm not sure they're still in print. I think you can get them as ebooks off of Warhammer Digital.
For £1 million.
No, I think they're
They're-
like £8 or something. Yeah.
I swear I went on to buy a heresy book the other day, and I was like, just the audiobooks were like £30 or something. I was
Yeah.
like, that's mental. That's a lot of money. So that series then is based after the Siege of Terra series, which is still currently being written in the timeline.
It's done, I think. Yeah, it's almost done, if not completely done, as of this record. Yeah.
But that's the in terms of timeline.
Yes,
the
it's
12-book
1,000 years. It's 1,000 years after.
Right,
up to 1,500 actually, which touches then onto the third founding,
which was after the second founding.
Which is after the second founding, before the sixth founding, and even before the fifth founding. We don't know about the fourth founding. The third founding was actually instituted by Roger Dorn himself, and it was.
How did Dorn feel about that?
Well, he was all right. He was the one that instituted it.
Okay,
and so the goal was to expand the sheer volume of Space Marine chapters out and beyond what had been done by the second founding. At this stage, there was already attrition had already taken a toll on some of the chapters, so they were either below strength or, in some cases, completely wiped out, as was almost the fate of the Imperial Fists. So the
Not so Imperial Fisty now, are ya?
They got Imperial fisted.
Yikes!
Too easy, Ben. Too easy. That was. I'm not even going to laugh.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah,
low hanging
that
fruit.
was.
Who's got low hanging fruit? You need to go and see a doctor, mate.
Ben, low hanging fruit, grown barber.
The low hanging fruit chapter.
The low-hanging fruit chapter. So this was just a standard kind of how would you describe founding? There was no great need to draw any gene seed from the existing chapters, though I'm sure that happened. It was produced almost entirely from the gene seed reserves. Now, listeners will recall gene seed is the 18th implant into a Space Marine that absorbs
You get put into a
material.
small closet with a magazine and a Tupperware box, and just get it all in the box. Just get it all in the top.
How did we miss that from the recap, crowd?
That's it, exactly.
Jesus.
Oh, I don't know. Your recap was so
Salvaged.
comprehensive.
Salvaged.
It
Moving
was so thorough. How the fuck did we miss it?
Oh, he's just gene seeding. Give him 2.5 minutes. It's fine.
So these are the progenoid glands, one at the neck and one in the crotch, that need to be removed. And each of those contains genetic material for the other 17 organs that were implanted during the initiate's kind of operations.
Did you say progenoid?
Progenoid, yeah.
Okay. I don't like that word. I have to say, it makes me feel like it does when you say amniotic. Oh,
And gland. I'm not a huge fan of the word gland either.
just put
right,
that in my amniotic progenoid gland.
It's a bit moist.
That's because you put it in the wrong. So you put it in the gusset, mate. That's the problem.
Well, the thing is that the progenoid glands do contain all of that genetic data, and it has not only to be harvested, but put in a moist amniotic sac, which is also referred to as a felf.
A sopping felf.
Oh,
Oh dear.
me no like.
Okay.
So we saw a massive explosion, not literally, of Space Marines out into the wider Imperium, where the Imperium goes to be
floating.
just fucking Space Marines everywhere.
This is not what I signed on for.
So someone opened a bag of potato chips in space. Or a bag of jelly babies. That's better. Yeah.
This third founding really was the template then for all the other foundings that came after, because it drastically increased the size of the numbers of Space Marine chapters that were protecting the Imperium. And so it began the long kind of haul towards getting 1,000 chapters of 1,000 Space Marines. So that's technically the kind of rule of thumb for the Imperium, for the Astartes in the Imperium. I thought we might
that 1,000 thousands, is that's not the totality of the Astartes force, or what?
There are 1,000 chapters, each of which is supposed to have 1,000 battle brothers. That's the current view of the Imperium.
Right. Okay. In totality.
In totality, this does not include the impacts of the Ultima founding. We discussed that, which was when the Primaris Space Marines came into reality. But up until that point, it's supposed to have been 1,000 chapters of 1,000 Space Marines.
So there are, of course,
over 1,000 days.
Over 1,000 days and 1,000 kisses.
It was biblical.
So just on the numbers thing, because you were saying that a company could take over a planet as a kind of surgical strike force, right?
Yeah.
Any planet, any day.
Any planet, any day. But if you look at that in comparison to, the Heresy era, they had legions of circa 100,000 traveling in one go. Was the idea kind of, because all they were doing was taking over single planets at a time, weren't they? Did they split their force up, or was it like all 100,000 went to this planet and brought it into compliance? Then they went to that planet and because if that's the case, and a single company could take over the planet, that's a sledgehammer cracking nut, isn't it?
Well, the great question. Space Marine legions didn't meet en masse unless there was a significant threat, such as the Greenskins, the orcs of a kingdom called Ulanor, or a space kingdom called Ulanor. With the Great Crusade...
All kingdoms are space kingdoms.
Spingdoms. Graal, get out. You've upset Dar. Get out.
Space Marine legions in general were split up amongst, I think it was something like over 4,000 different fleets.
Wow. Right. Okay.
Attacking various enemies at one time. There was also a different purpose for Space Marine legions versus Space Marine chapters. Space Marine chapters are used as a scalpel blade to take the head off of an enemy force. Space Marine legions and the Great Crusade was about the total domination and indoctrination of a planet back into the Imperium.
Right. So in that case, the chapters then, in terms of that kind of, they would go to a planet that the Imperium was warring with a Xenos race or whatever, or heretics. They kill all of the essential aspects of the elements of the enemy force, and then they fuck off and let the Astra Militarum and the rest of the military deal with the rest of the force. Is that the idea?
Yes, but all of those things happen in tandem. So the Space Marines, the Astra Militarum would act as the kind of cannon fodder that would soak up the attention of the enemy force, and then the Space Marines would launch in, fuck shit up, and then come out. A good example would be the events of the Sabbat Crusade, which is a relatively recent kind of war in the Imperium, where almost an entire sector has been corrupted and thus rebelled against the Imperium. That had millions upon millions of Astra Militarum in there fighting for the Imperium, and it's almost a completely humanocentric battle in terms of
homocentric.
Humanocentric. I'm going to put you in a fucking amniotic chamber. Whoa!
That is an amniotic anaconda. Whoa, you don't want to go near that.
Listen, it's really quiet. In that entire campaign, the Sabbat Crusade, there are only 3 Space Marines. Not chapters. 3 Space Marines from 3 different chapters are involved in that.
Guys.
Ben and Krell.
Yeah.
And
they're like, we are not meant to be here. Where the fuck is the rest of our chapter?
And they are portrayed as like a force multiplier. Having them in any given battle almost guarantees that you win. And it does, it underlines the rarity of Space Marines actually in the Imperium. In fact, almost all Imperial citizens never even see a Space Marine outside of a statue. And they're venerated as, the angels of death is what they're referred to. Yeah, in many cases.
How'd you get a Space Marine inside a statue to begin with?
He's gone full Krell today.
He's gone full Krell.
I'm being really disruptive, aren't I? I've got a question. The Sabbat Crusade, it's got Yiddish, Hebrew connotations to it. Where did the name come from?
Not touching it with a 10-foot fucking barge pole, mate. Move on. It's just the name.
All right, fine.
Yes, it does. I don't know why.
Oh, right, okay, fine.
Yeah.
My actual first serious question of the whole thing, and
it's offended Dar.
And no, it's a completely offensive question, or rather, it's a question that could be taken offensively and could get us not only cancelled but sued.
Sure.
It's not. I like the idea that. Sorry, just to touch on Krell's point. I like the idea that kind of threads of kind of ancient Terran cultures have kind of wove their way through into kind of modern day Warhammer 40K, like in the Dune series, all of the names are Arabic, aren't they? The whole setting is kind of
on Arrakis,
yeah, and so like all of the names, all of the culture is very much an Arabic culture. And it's wonderful. It works perfectly with the kind of. It's a really interesting juxtaposition against the kind of the advanced technological spacefaring kind of human species.
Do you think it's a bit of it's relative though? So Dune was written, I guess it was a Western writer that wrote it. So to a lot of us, Arrakis and that Middle Eastern connotations might seem a little bit alien, but actually it's quite common. You get someone in the Middle East reading it. It's like, I can totally relate to this.
Well, it's funny. It's all, if you look at the total side point, but if you look at a lot of the like cyberpunk novels, a lot of them in the kind of big made-up cities, Asian, Chinese and Japanese culture is the primary culture in which they exist in, because of, I guess they're basing it on the idea that those societies today are so numerous that, if you project it 1,000 years forward, they're basically the kind of the leading culture. So it could be.
We really are. We really are. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just as Ben said, it is off topic, but specifically for cyberpunk, I believe it was inspired by the idea of what happens if the kind of technical excellence of Japan is taken to the nth extreme. What would that do to people and culture? With Dune, Arrakis is in fact Iraq, the country of Iraq. And the spices, the oil, and the constant kind of invasion and colonization and extraction of oil by other powers, other Western-style powers. And so it's all deeply symbolic, but rooted in the time of when it was written.
Yeah.
Because in the 70s, 80s, all of those things were true at that time. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Cool.
Fascinating.
Anyway, Space Marines.
Space Marines. Oh, yeah, that's what we were talking about.
So there, each of the foundings is now brought along with various names. So, for instance, the 13th founding was the Dark Founding because it was inspired by the Inquisition. The Inquisition wanted to
get involved.
Get a few Space Marine chapters going that could combat the threats that they were identifying. One of the more famous chapters during that founding is referred to as the Exorcist chapter. These kind of have a split personality because they were one of the original Space Marine chapters who identified and fought in the Badab War, which is the second great civil war involving Space Marines. The original lore was part of the final indoctrination of a Space Marine scout is that they were possessed by force by a demon. And if they survived, they then could become a battle brother of that chapter. So it was a group of Space Marines who were heavily mutated inside their own armor, who had fought off a possession on their own will, or by their own will, and were thus immune, in quotes, to the influence and mutative power of chaos beyond that section. And that was an attempt to create a demon hunting or chaos hunting unit that could operate with impunity under the direction of the Inquisition. This very much kind of doubled up the efforts of another chapter of Space Marines, which we'll discuss after this section, but they still exist, the Exorcists still exist, and are loyal and a good fighting force used primarily against chaos and, those influenced by chaos.
How do they know, how can they be sure once this Marine has been possessed and then fights it off? How can they be sure that he's fought it off?
They go through a process of effectively mind stripping the Space Marines. So they go in and peel back the layers of their consciousness bit by bit and to root out any chaotic influence and then reassemble it. So it's not like mind wiping. The Space Marine is still themselves, but the fact that they were able to force out the demon through their own kind of loyalist nature is a huge step on the way to, being proved loyal. Mr. Chris?
I like to think that the process of being possessed by a daemon and get rid of it is like, I take it like the armor's completely impenetrable. Once it's on, that's it. But there's just a little thing, maybe like by the ankle, that they just lift up and they're like, "Are you ready for this?" Are you ready? And it's like, I don't know, getting a mad squirrel run up your leg and trying to get it out or something. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
the chaos purging squirrel of the Inquisition.
It's just like, oh my god, it's in my groin. Now it's on my back.
He's been squirrel purged.
Squirrel purged. Yeah.
Hey, Dad. Hey, fellas. How was Wasteland Volleyball? Oh, it was rad. I'm thirsty. Me too. Okay, what do we got? We got soda, OJ, some purple stuff, and 2 kinds of Corpse Starch Delight. 2 kinds? All right. Some kids love the rich, tangy taste of original Corpse Starch Delight. Others go for the coarser texture and extra chunks of Necromunda style. Dads love the ground-up dead dudes in both. Corpse Starch Delight. Yummy!
So the Dark Founding is not the only founding that gets names. In fact, almost all of them do, all of the ones that are recorded. The 21st founding, for instance, is referred to as the Cursed Founding, because all of the Space Marine chapters founded during that event have come to rather sticky ends, shall we say. So the most famous of these are the Lamenters, which are a Blood Angel successor chapter. They're yellow with a checkerboard kind of shoulder pad, which has a heart with a tear on it. They're like the My Little Pony, angry My Little Pony space vampires.
Sounds like a horrible looking livery, I'll be honest. Yellow and was it red as well?
Yellow with a black and white chessboard kind of shoulder pad that has a red heart with a teardrop on it.
Pretty naff.
Overlaid it.
Pretty
naff.
Not the best colour scheme I've heard.
Pretty loud, isn't it? It's quite summery, actually.
Given that they're space vampires, you probably would you would want to see them coming from a distance. So
they're space vampires.
Yeah, all the blood angels drink blood. They're all technically space vampires.
Wow!
How?
And in fact,
that came out of the blue. Was not
no,
expecting that.
They can't take their helmets off, can they?
It's part of their gene seed mutation. And in fact, there's one successor chapter called the Blood Drinkers. Guess what they do? That's right, farming. They
Did you just say they can't take their helmets off, Growl?
I thought once you put the Space Marine armor on, that's it.
No, you can take it off. You
can very much take it off.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
they have
then the canned squirrel exorcism isn't so funny, then, is it?
The danger, of course, with space vampires is they're weakest when they're napping. Yeah,
always.
Always. Inter-podcast reference. But
for listeners, Chris is very upset about the ideas. Is very upset by the idea of vampires having to nap because it makes them very vulnerable. So, do the Blood Angels only fight during the nighttime
in space?
In kind of
nighttime
80s,
in space.
80s new wave kind of ruffled shirts. Yeah. Some of the other notable chapters from the Cursed Founding are the Firehawks. These were a kind of a chapter that very much focused on using flamers and melter weapons to get the job done. They were a very kind of effective strike force and tended, if it could be set on fire, they would set it on fire versus not
setting it on fire.
This chapter disappeared during warp travel. They were lost in the warp. And that was their fate, but not their ultimate fate. We shall deal with their ultimate fate in a future episode. But other chapters like the Black Dragons and the Minotaurs were founded during the Cursed Founding. Now, I think we mentioned the Black Dragons last episode. These were the ones who have a mutated gene seed that they grow bony blades out of their arms, and their armor has holes in it that allow for this, and they use it in close quarters combat. The Minotaurs then are more of they have a mutation, but it's more of a mental mutation, where they are a mixture of psychotic, psychopathic, and xenophobic. They are very much a human first kind of ideal, but whether they were designed to or whether they naturally became this, they are a chapter used by the High Lords of Terra, and there's some evidence that they answer to the High Lords of Terra, but there's conjecture over it. They are used to put down Space Marine chapters that may become renegade. So they are Space Marines who specialize in destroying other Space Marine chapters en masse as a whole.
Is that kind of like the Space Wolves?
It's exactly the same kind of function that the Space Wolves seem to have held within the original 20 Space Marine legions. So they have specialized ammunition, which is used to get through the armor. See, I'm growing as a person. I was about to say penetrate. And and a lot of specialized vehicles that allow them to get through incredibly heavily defended areas to kind of mince up the Space Marines inside like a Kinder Surprise. Now, the interesting point about these lads, just in terms of aesthetics, is they are Spartan Space Marines. As in, their livery is that of Sparta. Yeah. Wow.
Hench.
But they're very much used to keep other Space Marine chapters in line. There are more foundings, but they're not necessarily as interesting as the kind of fates of the Dark Founding and the Curse Founding, both of which seem to involve influence from outside of the standard process of creating a Space Marine chapter. One will recall these are created via the High Lords of Terra, and then there's a standard process that they follow. With the Dark Founding, it was influenced by the Inquisition. I beg your pardon, I can't even speak. It was influenced by the Inquisition. With the Curse Founding, it appears to have been influenced by the Adeptus Mechanicus. And when I say influence, they were trying to modify the genetic code of the gene seed of the various implants to give each chapter a specific benefit in combat, so that they were trying to unlock the kind of Primarch project data that's held within the gene seed, as watered down as it is. There have been 26 recorded foundings. The last founding is the Ultima Founding, and that's where you see the rise of Primaris. So there's only been one founding that involved Primaris Space Marines. All of the other chapters have begun to replace their firstborn Space Marines with Primaris Marines. So as we can see, there are now ostensibly 1,000 chapters of Space Marines floating or ensconced in the Imperium of Man, defending and attacking almost simultaneously. It must be quite exhausting. Yeah. So, thoughts on foundings?
There's a lot of them. How many foundings is enough foundings?
Yeah. How many is too many?
How many is too many? Currently 28, because there's been 27.
Okay, right. Because it was interesting, you kind of said, so there was the first founding, and then the second founding, which followed the first. Then the third came after the second, and then moving on to the 13th, I was like, whoa. We seem to have missed a solid 10 founding. Well, the less said about those 10 foundings, the better.
Well, what? I think the 13th and the 21st, the Dark and Cursed foundings, are the most exciting in terms of the differences and the problems with influence in foundings from outside forces. There are numbered foundings, but there are even unrecorded foundings between the kind of standard numbers. So they're unfounded foundings. Mr. Chris.
The foundings are a result of a need to either keep other Space Marines in line, or because Inquisitors just fancied a slice of the cake. They just, we want some Space Marines.
We want to go swashbuckling.
At which point of an event you go, right, we need another founding right now. You know, how bad do things or good do things need to be before you go, okay, we are at the founding threshold. Found a way.
It's a fantastic question. I think it's more to do with the identification of a threat more than a need. Although once you've identified a threat, you need to have a solution. Because founding a chapter still takes 50 years from scratch. And that's,
I think you said 100 years last episode. Or could be up to 100 years.
Could be up to 100 years, but in general. And I'm saying, as I was about to say, it could be 50 years if they have access to veteran troops from other chapters to help form a leadership structure immediately, and also existing equipment. It's the difference between being able to open an Adeptus Mechanicus silo and find there's all the arms and armor you would need, versus turning up and there's a ticket line and you have to pull a number and wait for the next available slot in a Mechanicus production facility.
They're like, right, okay, let's find a new chapter. Let's have a look in container 1, and they open up and it's just like a single podron, one gun, like a bunch of spoons that the Emperor was using to repair fucking Mechanicus
plastic.
Yeah.
Plastic. Now go.
Some masking tape.
This is going to take 89 years.
So I thought we'd close out this episode by looking at 2 other organizations that deal hand in hand with Space Marine chapters. The first is how would you describe it? It's like a club that Space Marines send their best and brightest to. It's like a finishing school for Space Marines, and that is the Xenos Hunting Death Watch. So these were created roughly 2,000 years after the Horus Heresy. It's an organization sponsored by the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition, the alien hunting Inquisitors, who needed a dedicated Space Marine strike force. And thus was created something called the Death Watch. And the primary unit of a Death Watch, and I'm looking very carefully at Ben's face here, is referred to as a kill team. That's where that comes from.
That's where that comes from, Ben.
That's where it comes from, Crom. Yep.
The Marines that are seconded to a Death Watch, they either go for a set amount of time or until a Death Watch commander has judged that whatever criteria the chapter set had been met, and then they're sent back. They are almost always veteran Space Marines, either from the first company or from a veteran sergeant from one of the other companies. Mr. Ben.
I think I know something about this. Are these guys given a single special shoulder pad?
With a slither of the Emperor's armor?
No, that's Terminators, Chris. Get back in your box.
Oh, crap. So close. So close. So close. Man.
The livery of a Death Watch Space Marine is completely black, except for 2 areas. The first is their right pauldron, the right shoulder pad, which has...
They're flamingo pink.
Now we have to paint one. So their right shoulder pad has their original chapter color, the original color of their own home chapter, plus that chapter's logo, plus that chapter's icon, their symbol. On the left side, their entire left arm of the armor is painted kind of a silvery blue, like a silver color. Ooh, and their shoulder pad is a special Death Watch shoulder pad that it shows that they are a member of the Death Watch. They also are given a special issue bolt gun, which can fire 4 different types of ammunition. This is
fucking hell! As if it wasn't unbelievable enough to fire one single type of ammunition from a bolt gun with a million
never have
different.
To reload it, Ben.
I never have to reload it. Now they've got 4 types. They've got 2 Marines following them, just carrying all the ammo for them.
Well, if you look at the model, Ben, they have 4 separate small magazines that plug into the side of the bolt gun, or 2 on each side.
What? That's hilarious.
And the volume of all 4 of those magazines together is less than the magazine on a regular bolt gun.
Of course it is. Why would it be? Look at hell.
So these types of ammunition, they're like one is called a Kraken round, and that's used for Kraken open armor.
Oh, it's Kraken open
armor. I misspoke there. Another is like a Dragon's Breath round, so it fires and explodes with phosphorus. And then there's a kind of biochemical round, which in general is used in heavy bolters, but it allows them tactical flexibility so they can get where they need to go and kill what they need to kill. Mr. Chris?
It adds another element, doesn't it, to Russian roulette, having different kinds of ammunition. Like, if you're going to melt... You're just going to crack it open?
The Space Marines within a Death Watch, or within the Death Watch, if they're not purely veterans, they are then one of the more specialist ranks. So like a chaplain or librarian or apothecary, tech marines, they have command staff. Each sector or segmentum has an array of Death Watch watchtowers. These are really kind of chapter fortresses specifically for Marines in the Death Watch. Each one is managed by a watch commander or watch captain, and there is a rough structure mirroring a company, but there are so many missions that they're sent out on, these halls are usually quite empty. They're also full of the most esoteric and confusing weapons, either made by the Imperium or captured by the Imperium, some of which are then used by Space Marines against their enemies. And this really is one of the more unusual aspects of the Death Watch, because use of an alien's weapon is punishable by death, regardless of your rank within the Imperium. It's viewed as not only a perversion of your kind of dedication to the Imperium, but also a perversion of the will of the Omnissiah from the Adeptus Mechanicus, which of course produces, under license in some instances, all of the small arms used by Space Marines. But
the Death Watch are allowed to use them.
The Death Watch have got kind of special dispensation from the Inquisition, because they are what's referred to as an Ordo Militant associated with the Ordo Xenos section of the Inquisition. So they use swords that are shaped, they use power swords, but they look like they are Necron swords and have a similar effect. They have various kind of, how would you describe it? Bodged together heavy weapons, including a heavy bolter shotgun, which it's called a frag round. So basically it fires. Yeah, it's a shotgun, the muzzle size of which is about 7 or 8 inches in diameter. So it can
it's my kind of gun.
Blow a hole. Yeah, it can blow a hole through the largest of alien being. All the weapons they use are specifically to kill aliens. Now, that also includes any traitorous human citizen that is either enslaved by the aliens or has sided with the aliens. This includes everything from Eldar, Orcs, Tyranids, Tau, and in some cases abhumans as well, like Beastmen and Squats, but you kind of might be getting into the...
I thought you were about to recite the podcast intro there. Tyranids, Tau... Eldari.
So is that the primary difference then between a Death Guard and a standard Space Marine? Is their weaponry, essentially? Do they use different tactics, or are they? Death Watch.
It's Death Watch. Yes, they are. They are not a standing force. Their members cycle through, depending on how long their original chapter decided to lend them out to the Death Watch organization. In very much like it's the Top Gun of psychopathic transhuman killers. You go there, you're given further training, you're given specialist weapons, and your missions are not part of a larger ongoing campaign. Kill team missions in general are go here, kill this, come back. And then that's an end of it. And then the same again. So they could, a single Space Marine who's joined a Death Watch kill team could go, will see in however many years they are there, far more conflict, far more dangerous conflict than they would if they were to remain within their home chapter.
Do they get to keep the pauldron?
I was literally. You're on fire, Ben. You're second guessing everything. Just as I'm about to say it. When they are released from the Death Watch, they go back to their home chapter. There's all various honors and celebrations that they're given, but they retain the specialized Death Watch shoulder pad, the left pauldron, and they are able to effectively paint or strip down the armor on their left arm to be that silver color, but the rest of their armor is repainted in the original livery, the original color of the chapter. They are then viewed in a certain amount of awe as having sacrificed the brotherhood of their home chapter to serve the Emperor in a more active and specific way than even a Space Marine would. But they then invariably become veteran sergeants or sergeants of scout squads, where they are able to use their expanded knowledge to train a new generation of initiates for the Space Marine chapter. So cool. It's of benefit,
like a drill sergeant.
Yes, that kind of idea, but is still a sergeant for a specific squad. So the Death Watch really is one of the kind of shining lights of the Imperium in terms of it works hand in hand with existing chapters and produces experts among experts of how to kill aliens and the tactics to use. So it's a plus. Such an organization is a plus for the Imperium. It should be noted that it's not always specific chapters that send Marines to the Death Watch, even though they can. Any chapter can petition to send Marines to a Death Watch fortress. They are also accepting of what's referred to as Black Shields. Black Shields are Space Marines who have, for whatever reason, abandoned their chapter or do not wish to have their chapter identified. And so these Marines turn up on the doorstep of a Death Watch kind of fortress and go, "Can I come in? Can I join your group?"
Please, sir.
And in general, after a few tests, they are permitted to enter. This means that there is no doubt that there are loyalist Space Marines from Renegade or even from Chaos Legions serving the Imperium faithfully in the Death Watch. That is the implication of that model, that if a Space Marine from a Renegade chapter decides that, you know what, we've all made a mistake, I'm getting out of here, that's repent. The only way he can, it's not even repent, that's the only way he can continue to serve. And he has to do so in secrecy. He can't, he arrives, that Space Marine arrives with their armor completely black and all the file numbers, cut out and shaved off, so they can't be identified at all.
It feels very much like, is it the North Watch, the North Guard in Game of Thrones?
The Black Watch.
That kind of thing.
The Black Watch. Yeah.
Something like that. Everyone's welcome, almost like you're let bygones be bygones kind of thing.
So you're essentially stripping your identity before you arrive then. So you cannot be held accountable for any wrongdoing you may have done previously.
Yes, and I think in at least one or two instances, the Death Watch gives them their name. They are renamed as well. So the only other thing to mention about the Death Watch is their vehicles and equipment. They have access to the standard vehicles and equipment that have that a regular Space Marine has.
Rhino APCs.
Rhino APCs, exactly
bikes, right. Land speeders.
Land speeders, land raiders, predators, whirlwinds, the various razorbacks, the various types of armored vehicle. With one noticeable addition, they have something called a Corvus Black Star, which is a flying land raider, effectively. So it's an aircraft.
So just a flying raider then.
Yeah. No, it's a Corvus Black Star, Chris. So it's a huge stealth transport plane, but it's also a fighter bomber. So it has two huge areas underneath it where that look like cargo containers because they are cargo containers that contain a cargo of Death Watch Marines. So these are the ones that these will make orbital insertion, forgive the word, and will discharge their load all over the face of the planet, so that the Space Marines then go out and take over.
Initiate sploosh.
Yeah. So yeah, Death Watch. Hooray!
Hooray!
It seemed like you were going the scenic route, describing some of these vehicles are like, yeah, it's a Land Raider that flies, okay? It's got cargo holding things, but it's not for cargo. Right, okay.
So how are they? I don't really understand the stealth aspect. You're like, are they disguised as containers, but they're hiding in plain sight because they are actually just containers? Is that
no? The vehicle itself is stealthy. So it's like all the other vehicles in the Imperium. It's quite boxy, but it's got various electromagnetic and specialized kind of baffles.
It's covered in anechoic treatment. Can't be.
Yeah, it's surrounded by snakes. Surrounded
anaconda
by snakes.
Galore. Release the anaconda.
Splat.
The final thing I wanted to touch on before we close out for the record is a specialist chapter founded as part of the second founding. In fact, founded before the second founding and after the first founding.
Was it the 1.5 founding?
Yeah. Give me a minute and I'll get the timings right. I think it's the 1.95 founding. It was in the very kind of end days of or the closing years, I suppose, of the Horus Heresy, when the threat of the demonic and the chaotic became so apparent that the Imperium needed a crack fighting force to fight against
another crack fighting
demons.
Force.
This is the first crack fighting force against demons that the Exorcists are a pale shadow of, made as they are in the Dark 13th founding. It has a kind of unique place in the lore, especially as the Horus Heresy books have been fleshed out, because you watch it become founded in almost prior and during the Siege of Terra. It is the Grey Knights, the elite demonic hunters of the Imperium. So these are Space Marines, but they have had their gene seed altered by the Emperor himself with his own DNA. So these are I suppose the easiest way to say it was where a Space Marine of the Space Marine Legions has a direct link to the Primarch. So the Primarch's DNA is within their own gene seed and thus within them. If you replace the Primarch with the Emperor, that's what happened for the Grey Knights. So this is the second time the Emperor has specifically used his own DNA to create a fighting troop. The first being the Adeptus Custodes, of the Adeptus Custodes. Mr. Chris,
does having a slice of the Emperor in you, does that make you automatically superior to other Space Marine chapters who only had mere Primarch DNA in them, or does it not really work like that?
The short answer is yes. That it does. It makes you psychically powerful and also psychically resistant to what I like to call psychic powers, and it makes you almost morally incorruptible. You will always do the right thing in terms of the Imperium, and that is reinforced through their entire initiation process, very similar to that of the standard Space Marines, but also through their indoctrination and training, which is wildly different to that of standard Space Marine chapters. Now, I forgot to give the normal caveat I do at the start of these episodes, where I say, all of this stuff is an introduction. We're literally telling you that these things exist. So we're not diving into huge detail here. So
we're glazing over.
Please don't use the word glazing. That's another word. I see. Sorry.
Amniotic glazing.
Imagine being glazed with amniotic fluid. Oh,
shame glaze.
Shame glazed. Oh no, that's now the name of our Space Marine chapter, the Shame Glazers.
Sold. 100% sold on that.
And their battle cry is Glazer. Glazer. So the Grey Knights, as I say, are unique. They have 8 brotherhoods rather than companies, although they are roughly 1,000 Marines in kind of populace, and each of those brotherhoods represents one of the founding masters. So there are 8 founding masters of the Grey Knights, or selected as the founding masters of the Grey Knights, all of whom were imperial heroes during the Horus Heresy. Some of whom are even named in the Heresy books, 2 or 3 of them within the first 5 or 6 books. So very early on, you get to follow the life and the trials and tribulations, I suppose, of these Space Marines that end up becoming the Grand Masters of the Grey Knights. Mr. Ben.
Can I take a guess at one of those characters' names?
Yeah.
Is it Nathaniel Garrow?
I don't know. Who's that?
It is. You're right.
It
is. I don't know who
is.
that is.
It totally is. He was the dude who escaped Istvan 3 or 5, one of the Istvans.
3.
And he got back to the Emps and he was like, buddy, shit's going down. Here's the deal. And then they didn't believe him and they locked him up. But I think he became some... I'm only saying this because he's the only hero that I know who's...
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll put you out your misery. No, he's not one of them.
Swing and a miss.
And one of the very first characters, Garviel Loken, who was in fact, I think the first speaking character in the first Horus Heresy book. He was offered the position, but turned it down because he wanted to go and fuck Horus up.
Because he was a part of Horus's Legion, is that right? He was one of their captain. In fact, he was a part of what's referred to as the Mournival, which is their the advisory council, the 4-member advisory council to Horus. So he was as excellent a Space Marine as you could be, and refused the call to be a traitor. Anyway, yes. So Grey Knights. An interesting part, one of the many interesting parts, is that their chapter world is the Jovian moon of Titan, Jovian being Jupiter. When they were founded, they were founded over a number of years under the guidance of Malcador the Sigillite. He's the kind of the second in command of the Imperium, the kind of head administrator of the Emperor. He, sensing all the demonic activity and the Emperor guiding him, he began the process of creation of the most advanced arms and armor that the Imperium could function via the Adeptus Mechanicus. Mr. Chris?
He invented or developed the most advanced weaponry, but without developing the technology. Is that right?
There was no innovation.
The Imperium refused to innovate and evolve their
I think maybe I'm misspeaking, because the innovation aspect was really hammered down at the end of the Horus Heresy. There was no innovation from that point, from the Emperor's ascension. There was innovation, but it's really, specifically for the Grey Knights, it's really more of merging the kind of esoteric demonic fighting equipment with traditional Astartes armor and bullets. So when the 8 masters arrived on Titan, when they're assigned, they found everything fully equipped and all of their like 1,000 initiates ready for genetic implantation. Indeed, some of them had already gone through that process. He then warded the planet. So the Emperor and Malcador warded the planet to make it not only psychically invisible, but actually invisible. They pulled an entire moon out of space and time. And so when it returned a few years after the end of the Horus Heresy, when the Imperium really did need their assistance. And when it came back after those few years, it had in fact been a significant amount of time. I want to say about 200 years, but I might be wrong. It was enough that when the Titan reemerged, it was an effective veteran fighting force because they had trained so damn much with the weapons and equipment they had. And so it was, ready to begin in earnest fighting the forces of chaos. Mr. Chris.
Sorry, it was made invisible. This is a question. Was it made invisible so it was actually there but just couldn't be seen or detected, and so it was kind of almost protect itself, or it actually got removed from time and space, put into another dimension or whatever? And if that's the case, where did it go?
It went into its own little pocket dimension in the warp. So it was, the entire planet was covered in a Geller field, in a specialized Geller field, and pulled into the warp and then deposited back. In terms of its invisibility, it simply ceased to exist in our own world.
Okay.
But then they purged every record of anything to do with the moon and the Grey Knights completely from Imperial records. It is by far one of the single most well-kept secrets in the history of the Imperium to this date. Except for now.
The cat is out of the bag.
We're publicizing it.
As far as the Imperium at large, including all the leadership, it doesn't exist. It's only known to a select few in the High Council, or the High Lords of Terra, but also to select members within the Inquisition. That is not to say no one ever sees them. They do see them, but the standing order for any interaction with Grey Knights, if the Grey Knights turn up to a world to purge a demonic infestation or some force of chaos, the standing order is that all citizens of the Imperium are to be executed. Because they cannot let the secret of the Grey Knights out into the wider Imperium. To the point where, if they're serving alongside Space Marines, those Space Marines will be mind-wiped. They will have their identity and memories erased and will have to go through a kind of a backup process within their own Space Marine chapter to reestablish an identity, not their original identity. It's gone.
So the Space Marine gets their mind and personality wiped. They go back to their chapter. Does that chapter understand what's happened to them? Do they know why? Because obviously they can't be like, oh, it's the Grey Knights, because that was the whole purpose of them having their thing wiped.
The commanders of the Space Marine chapter may have access to that knowledge, but in general, it's presented to them as they were struck by a weapon that wiped their mind. Aren't aliens horrible? A famous example that counters that point is one of the battles for Armageddon. I think it's the first battle for Armageddon, where the demon Primarch Angron, leader of the World Eaters, manifested and, fuck shit up on the planet. The Grey Knights were sent there to handle that incursion, and I think in that instance, the entire populace of the planet was sterilized and put in concentration camps, and the Logan Grimnir, who is the chapter master of the Space Wolves, the first founding Space Wolves, he protested the treatment of the kind of noble and heroic warriors of the Imperium that they should have such an ignoble fate. So, as with anything in 40k, the lore can be used to support utter secrecy or secrecy, but people are still allowed to live out their lives. Mr. Ben.
Why? Why is it so important that they're a secret from the Imperium? What are the risks involved?
It's, in effect, the Imperium is still fighting the same battle. The Horus Heresy actually is still going on from a certain perspective. And that includes the Emperor's diktat that demons do not exist. And the warp, there are no beings in the warp. And anyone who says so should be executed because it entices people to investigate it, which in general leads to demonic incursion and possession. And so they're fighting.
It's a gateway. It's a gateway drug.
It's a gateway conversation. Exactly right. Much like this
gateway
one.
Conversation. Yeah.
And so
I'm definitely going to go and use it after this.
And so that's why there's so much secrecy. They're still fighting the same battle against Psychers, Psycho Grove, to make sure that the birth of humanity as a psychic race is slowed as much as possible, so that the Imperium can get a handle on it. So that's the kind of the context for the Grey Knights. In terms of their arms and armor, again, there's 8 brotherhoods, very much like a company, and although in some instances slightly larger. In terms of their equipment, a standard Grey Knight in power armor is equipped with what's referred to as a nemesis force weapon. So it's a force weapon, but these take the shape of a 2-handed sword, a polearm, a spear, or what's referred to as falchions. So it's 2 falchions, it's 2 smaller swords, and a wrist-mounted storm bolter. These are the double-barreled bolt guns, and these exclusively fire psych-out rounds. So these are the bolt rounds.
Wow! Oh, psych out, mate.
These are anti-psych or anti-demon bolt rounds that are impregnated with that kind of the leftover dust when the Emperor absorbs a psyker, and so they just tear apart, physically tear apart humans, but also psychically tear apart demons and humans. Mr. Chris.
You just answered it. I was going to ask, these rounds specialize in nullifying and vaporizing psychers and demons, but are they physical shells? Could they still fuck shit up?
Yes,
to a normal
absolutely
dude? Yeah, fine. Yeah,
so very much a kind of extension of the psych-out grenades used by the Calexis assassins. Do you remember? It's the anti-psyker assassins that fire or that can throw these grenade types. That will take out any kind of psychic being, but also it's a frag grenade as well, which will screw stuff up. So
psych out. It just sounds like everyone goes down for a good time. I just can't unsee people just like freaking out positively. Like, yay!
Are you chilling out or are you psyching out? Which one is it? What are you doing tonight?
So those are the force weapons as well are a similar effect in terms of anti-psyker, because every single member of the Grey Knights is a psychic space marine. They are magic users in effect, as we would say in the fantasy setting. So it's the aggression, training, and physicality of a space marine plus anti-psyker weapons, plus being an accomplished psyker themselves, who can perform exorcism and cast psychic powers at their enemies.
Plus complete immunity to chaos and corruption, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And so in their power armored form, they tend to appear in squads of 5 or 10, and they have various support weapons at that kind of infantry level, including a psych-out cannon, which is a heavy bolter that fires psych-out rounds, a psi cannon, but also what's referred to as an incinerator, which is a flamethrower firing promethium, which is the Imperium's version of kind of a cross between napalm and diesel fuel, which itself has been blessed. So it's holy flamethrowers that do psychic damage, as well as setting things on fire.
Wow.
The other good weapon they have is something called a silencer, but it's PSY Lincer, which is
very clever, very clever.
Far out.
A psychic rotary cannon, which will physically cut through enemies, but also emotionally and spiritually cut through enemies. and that's just their power armor. They don't really have jumpsuits. They have a specialized backpack which lets them jump through the warp, so they can instantly teleport anywhere on the battlefield. There is a risk, of course, with any travel through warp, that they can become lost within the warp space, and they can either die in there or have to fight their way back. So even basic... Go ahead.
Sorry, just on that then, the fact that they can jump between, I guess it's used sparingly. They don't use it very often. They only use it when they need to, because there is some risk.
It's absolutely, yeah. It's as needed.
They can't be like, I really want some crisps, but I can't be fucked going to the shops.
I'll just totally use it. I'll totally use it.
They also have Terminator armor, which is, as we've mentioned, the heaviest infantry armor plus the shard of the Emperor's armor. And they have all the same weapons available to them, but are more heavily protected. And indeed, that is how they were first introduced into the game. The Grey Knights appeared in the first edition, and in fact appeared in the Realms of Chaos sourcebook. The very one that you chaps got me for my birthday last year. So yeah,
you're welcome.
You are actually able to field a complete force of Grey Knights in the very first edition of 40k.
What a treat.
In terms of vehicles, again, they have all the same sorts of vehicles that a Space Marine chapter would have, but they are also got all the kind of mini Gellerfields and hexagrammic wards on it that makes it very difficult for demons to get at them, and offers what's referred to as an invulnerable save, which will stop almost everything, or gives you a chance that almost everything will be stopped by this type of field. Of special note, I suppose we should say, they do have dreadnoughts, which we discussed last episode, which was the angry danger coffins of Space Marines. But they also have something called Dread Knights, which... Have you seen the third movie in The Matrix where the guys were walking around in these robots? So it looked like it was like a baby Bjorn, and they had the arms and the guns and what have you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You can have them. Those are available. And it looks... Cool. The model looks hilarious, because it does look like a Grey Knight in a baby Bjorn on a giant robot that has no head. So it looks quite strange.
Baby Bjorn?
It's the kind of harness that you put a kid in on your front.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
But these Dread Knights have access to the heavy side cannons, heavier versions of the silencer, a heavy incinerator that can melt through a vehicle, and then a huge two-handed, for the size, sword or a large demon hammer. So it is an elite fighting force of the Imperium, specifically designed to combat chaos in a way that no other Space Marine can. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the content for this episode of Laying Down the Lore of 40k. Again, a shotgun blast of information to the face of your ears. Wait.
To your ear faces.
Words.
To your ear faces.
I'm conflicted. I am sorry, go on, carry on, Darren. Close it out.
No, that was it. I was about to ask, what do you think of that? So
Okay.
what we covered there was the other foundings of the Space Marines, including some of the more interesting ones. We looked at the kind of
1, 2, 3,
cohesive,
13, and 26.
Yeah, the cohesive alien fighting force of the Death Watch, and then the founding of 1.95, which is the Grey Knights anti-demon Space Marines.
Psych out Space
Discuss.
Marines.
I'm conflicted because I historically I've quite liked the Grey Knights, just simply because when I saw the figurines in one of the stores, Element Games, I just like the armor. They're kind of they look like traditional knights, don't they?
Yeah, it's all silver.
Yeah. They've got that kind of like Templar Knight look about them, and I thought they looked excellent. And as you explained them, they are kind of uber Space Marines, and I like them even more. However, they are imperialists, and I hate the Imperium. So I'm very conflicted. Can you get Chaos Grey Knights?
No, not at all. And in fact, there is one Grey Knight, one of the masters, called Khal Drago, who has been in the warp for over a century. He's lost in the warp, and he's just walking around in Terminator armor with a shield and a sword, withstanding every kind of demonic army that's sent to him. He is literally a one-man army, and
cool
is mincing his way through the warp, ignoring the Chaos Gods and their temptations, and killing everything he can get his hands on. He's an absolute psychopath. And you can have him on the tabletop. He can kind of appear and then disappear
in the warp. Oh, right, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, he just a short vacation to corporeal space. He's like,
I've
had enough of this warp shit. I'm going to go and deal with something way easier.
Going to come up for air.
10
come
days.
up for space air.
Ryanair flight from the warp.
But not once in this kind of travail has he ever wavered in any way, shape, or form. As I said, they have the Emperor's genetic code in them, consensually, and thus will never waver.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they are badass. But the underlying issue for me is they're of the Imperium. So for me,
they hate. To be fair, though, they kill far more members of the Imperium than you would think, because after they've, got rid of a chaos infestation, they kill everything they can get their hands on, so that their identity remains secret.
Yeah.
Still,
so
principles. I'm a man of principles.
And there was one instance. It may actually now be apocryphal because it seems to have been expunged. But the Grey Knights turned up to fight off a demonic infestation that the Sisters of Battle were fighting, and the Grey Knights decided they needed a buff. They needed a faith buff for themselves. So they killed all the Sisters of Battle and smeared their blood on their armor, and then went in to fight the demons.
Wow!
Now we can fight the demons.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan of that, because I do like the Battle Sisters. What were the other guys called? The Death Watch.
Death Watch.
The Death Watch.
They're my backup. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might prefer them to the Grey Knights, simply because they're kind of more. They're more vulnerable, aren't they? They're kind of more relatable because they're more human, I guess. The Grey Knights don't even seem. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if you can do an entire stint as a Death Watch and then you go back to your original chapter, you're a bit of a badass, aren't you? Because you've kind of overcome, the external and internal demons.
But you're seen to have served the Imperium at the cost of your own kind of relationship with your battle brothers. So it does, when they come back, they are held as a kind of a warrior apart from other warriors. And there really is, I suppose, in some chapters there's viewed with a bit of stigma, because they've been exposed to other Space Marines, in some cases literally, where the ideals and traditions of other Space Marines may have influence them. So they are, it's not all sugar and spice when they come back.
Yeah, they're cool as fuck though, man. I love the specialized pauldron, because it's kind of got text written on it, hasn't it?
It does, yeah.
Correctly. Wait, what is the text? Is it some sort of anti-Xenos?
If you can read this,
scripture,
you're too fucking close to my left shoulder. Prepare to be bolt gunned.
I was literally about to say, if you can read this, blam!
But in Latin. Or
in Latin,
High Gothic or whatever the fuck. Nice. Sweet. That was awesome. Me likey Space Marines.
Okay, so that's us done with the kind of individual day-to-day factions. What we'll handle next episode is the even more mysterious and esoteric events and locations in the Imperium, even beyond the Grey Knights.
Oh, God. It's like it's just a gift that keeps on giving. It's just like, these guys are the most awesome ever, apart from these guys, which are even more awesome. And then these guys over here, these are awesome plus two.
That is how I feel about 40k at the moment. Everything's like super extra, everything all at once, all the time, until we talk about the next thing, which is even more extra.
Yeah.
But that isn't as extra as the next thing we're about to talk about, because there's a billion of those, and they've got super duper armor.
What I love is that's exactly how everyone feels whenever a new codex comes out, because there's something called power creep, where the newest codex reflects all the changes in the previous codices, plus how to make these guys amazing. And it's just, in general, the final codex for each edition is the most powerful for that edition. So it's very much extra.
Do you not feel that like kind of, it just takes the edge off it? Do you know what I mean? Everyone's special, so no one's special kind of thing. Is there that kind of vibe a bit?
Yes, I suppose there is actually, but everyone, the specialization is for a specific thing. The Death Watch are really, if you're facing a Xenos army, an alien army, you've got a fairly good chance of pulling off victory, because it's a dedicated force specifically made for fighting Xenos. If you're fighting Chaos, you might not be able to pull off a victory because you're not geared towards that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like in terms of game mechanics, the kind of the standard rule that Games Workshop uses is an army design is ready for production once it begins to hit somewhere between a 45 and 55% win rate, which means that's a 10% window of how good an army can be. But that's,
Yeah, it's difficult making things more awesome than others when they have to be equal on the tabletop.
Yeah.
I can see the challenge. Yeah.
We've got to wrap up. Shall I wrap up?
Yep.
Yeah, man.
All right, that's all from us. Thank you so much for listening. Details and imagery for the topics we've discussed in this podcast can be found on our website at layingdownthelore.com. We also have all our previous episodes on there, release schedules, merchandise, and you can sign up for the Laying Down the Lore newsletter, which includes exclusive info about upcoming releases, behind-the-scenes chat, and some extra lore not covered in the podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard in this episode and you want to support us, head over to patreon.com/layingdownthelore40k and sign up today for as little as £3. This will give you access to our Discord server, so you can come and tell us exactly what you think of Kral and his opinions about the Imperium.
Hey.
We'll be back again soon, displaying just how little Chris and I know. Until then, bye.
Farewell, everybody. Ciao.
If you tell anyone we were here, we will kill you. Bye.